they think about supplements, peptides, stem cells, maybe hormone optimization, and maybe some futuristic anti aging treatments, right? But what if the single most powerful intervention available today costs nothing and anybody has access to it, right? What if the biggest mistake people are making isn't failing to take a supplement, but failing to get this, prioritize their sleep? That's right. So that's what we're talking about today. I hope you guys are ready because the longevity game is about to start. What's happening, everybody? Mike Ward here, host of the Longevity Game podcast. I'm also the CEO and the founder of Next Level TRT, or a longevity and performance medicine practice just right outside of Fort Worth. We take high performers and we optimize their health and their health span. So if this is your first time, I hope you have a good time. We're going to talk about a lot of cool stuff today. So first, let's talk about some longevity news updates. I love kind of diving in and seeing where the science is leading us, because man, there's so many cool things, on the horizon, and so sometimes I'm people love to under promise and over deliver, right? For the most part. And so I always just hope, because I follow a few people. And it's kind of like, well, we have just a couple years down the road, we have this thing, but maybe they may launch it way sooner, and I've seen that happen before. So I always like to stay up to date on the latest stuff, And so I got three stories I want to talk to you about today, and I'm going to read through them just briefly. So the first one says a massive study finds that sleep directly influences biological age, right? And so here's how this works. So a major study involving more than 500,000 participants, that's a lot, found that a U-shaped relationship between sleep duration and biological aging. And so researchers had evaluated multiple biological aging clocks, and there are a lot of them. And they found that both too little sleep and too much sleep was associated with accelerated aging. And that's where that U shaped curve is, right? Because if you sleep too much or if you sleep too little, it's going to affect your longevity, your health span, right? And both of those things were associated with accelerated aging, right? And so the sweet spot appeared to be, guess, what do you think? What's the sweet spot? How many hours do you think would be the best for most people? It was between 6.5 and 8 hours. So if you guess between 6.5 and 8, you nailed it. So, we spent years arguing like whether 7 hours is ideal, 8 hours is ideal. I don't know if you ever saw there was a speech I listened to by Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he's like, you have 18 hours a day. I do a terrible Arnold. He's like, to work out, right? He's talking about you sleep 6. If you can't sleep 6, you got to sleep faster, or something like that. But it was so funny, right? Because he lived on 6 hours of sleep all the time, right? And so, there's just been a lot of contention about, how many hours is needed for optimal sleep, And so 6.5 to 8, that's what they found. And so the bigger takeaway is that chronic sleep deprivation appears to accelerate aging throughout. I didn't turn my settings off. Throughout multiple organ systems, and this is important, right? So I started out as a nurse once I finally got out of school, and I worked nights, and so I would work 3 to 4 nights a week, and they weren't all successive. They weren't all in a row. Sometimes it'd be 2 nights off, and then I'd be two nights I'd be working, and then I'd be off one night, and then I'd work another night, or I'd work one night off, one night on, one night off. It was a disaster schedule, right? They just kind of fit me in where they needed me, and that wreaks havoc on your health, and your on your biorhythms, on your circadian rhythms, and it is disastrous for your health span. And I hate it because I have lots of friends who are still nurses out there working in the hospital, and their schedules just it's nuts. And this is not just nurses. I mean, think about firemen, police officers, EMS, certified nurses assistants, LPNs, LVNs. Like, I mean, doctors. Like, there are so many people who live this roller coaster lifestyle where they're working nights and they're living on the in the days, on their days off. And it is rough, right? And this can lead to chronic sleep deprivation. I remember whenever I first went to days after being on nights for so long. After I left the ICU, I was working as a nurse practitioner, ICU intensivist. That was the job title. All right, APRN intensivist. That's what they call it. And I was working nights. I was the only critical care specialist in the whole hospital. It was a very large hospital right outside Fort Worth, and except for the emergency room physician, which they never left the emergency room. And so I would always be all over the hospital. If there was a code, I was in the code. If somebody needed, like some type of intervention, I had to do that, like like a central line or an art line or a chest tube or any of that stuff. I had to be there. I was the one to do all that stuff, which was, it was an exciting job. Very sad at most times because there's always somebody dying in the ICU, right? People that you've grown close to, because you've been taking care of them for weeks or months. And I would work 7 on, 7 off. And my gosh, whenever I moved, whenever I left the ICU and I founded and opened Next Level TRT, um, and I just couldn't afford to continue working in the hospital because my schedule was just filling up in the clinic, and I just had to be there more than I had to be in the ICU. So I ended up walking away. But my gosh, my life changed so much whenever I went to days. It took a few weeks, right, to get my body acclimated and to get my circadian rhythms back, correct. Because we're not meant to live at night. We're not meant to be up at night. We're just not. That's just not biologically. That's not how our biorhythms work, right? But my gosh, it was a game changer once I finally was able to live a normal, like, sleep at night, work in the daytime. It was wow. It was amazing. It was amazing. I remember thinking, I have all this energy. Like, this is new, you know? And so I just feel so bad for all my friends out there that are still just grinding that night shift. Anyway, I know it's a long, I got really derailed there. So, anyway, story number 2. Let's talk about this next story I found. Sleep regularity may matter more than sleep duration. Now, this goes back to those biorhythms, right? One of the biggest emerging themes in sleep science is consistency. And I have an aura ring, and I'm going to talk about that here in a little bit, because it does tell you, how consistent you are. It even gives you your chronotype, and we'll go into that. But anyway, so the story is researchers are increasingly finding that going to bed and waking up at roughly the same time every day predicts longevity better than simply chasing a certain number of hours. Okay, so the previous story was the sweet spot is 6.5 hours to 8 hours, right? Yeah. In this story, the sweet spot is consistency, right? But if you can get consistently 6.5 to 8 hours, I'm sure it'll be perfect. So sleep regularity has been linked to lower mortality risk, and improved cardiovascular health. Okay. And so the body loves rhythm. And this is why when you work a crazy, swing schedule where you work days or you work nights or you're all over the place, it affects your body, right? Your brain, your hormones, your immune system, and metabolism all run on a schedule. And so can sleep consistency, super important. But if you work one of those crazy schedules like I used to work, it's hard to have consistent sleep. Again, it's rough and it's hard on your body. My gosh. All right, and so next, story number 3. Have you guys ever heard of these biological clocks or epigenetic clocks? These are fascinating, and there's so many different types, right? And so I'm gonna dive into that. But let's talk about the story. So the longevity fields, it's rapidly moving toward measuring stuff, right? Like biological age, rather than just counting the numbers of candles on your birthday cake. They're looking at how your body is aging. Is it consistent with your numerical age or your chronological age? Well, so new epigenetic clocks and organ specific aging clocks can now estimate like how quickly various systems are aging. And that's really, really cool. Like sometimes I feel like we're we're in the future, some of this stuff is just really wild. So, researchers are now using these clocks as tools to study how sleep, exercise, nutrition, and stress affect your rate of aging. And so, I mean, when scientists look at the factors that most consistently influence biological age, sleep just keeps showing up, right? Near the top of the list. And people just neglect their sleep. And I have patients all the time that and this is probably one of the number one chief complaint in my office. It goes like this. Uh, I don't know. I'm just so tired all the time. And then my next question is, well, do you sleep well? And most of the time it's like, well, not really. Not really. Or like, how many hours of sleep do you get? 5, 6 hours. Of course you're exhausted, right? Because you're not prioritizing your sleep. And so, but it's not just that, right? Like some people have a hard time falling asleep. I take care of very high level patients, very high level. And these people are like presidents, CEOs. Like these people are like major movers and shakers. And I imagine that they carry a lot of stress that might help prevent them from getting adequate sleep. You know what I mean? So it's not just about people choosing not to sleep. You know what I mean? And so, anyway, let's go a little deeper on these biological clocks. Okay, so before we move deeper into the sleep subject, I want to pause here. And I want to explain something that's become a major part of the longevity conversation, right? This is the biological age. Okay. Your chronological age, like I was saying, is simple. It's right. It's the number of candles on your birthday cake. But biological age is different. Biological age asks a much more important question. It asks this question: how old is your body acting? Right? That's the biological age, right? Two people can both be 50, right? But one may have better metabolic health, better cardiovascular fitness, better inflammatory profile, and a recovery capacity of somebody that's a way younger, right? While the other person may be aging much faster on the inside because they don't have any of that, right? And so this is where biological clocks come in, right? A biological clock is it's like a mathematical model, right? And it uses biomarkers to estimate age, right? So some clocks use blood markers, some use DNA methylation patterns, right? And some use immune markers. And so, proteomics and metabolomics and what's that other word? Multi-omic data, right? And so the most well-known category is the epigenetic clock. And so epigenetics refers to chemical tags that sit on top of your DNA. And these chemical tags, they influence gene expression. So how your DNA activate, right? And so these tags, they don't change your genetic code, right? But they do affect how the genes behave. And so one of the most studied epigenetic tags is DNA methylation. And I know we've talked about DNA methylation a lot on this show. But it's just so fascinating, right? Because you can have twins that like their DNA is absolutely identical, but one can grow, you know, on a completely different path depending on how they choose to monitor their health or take care of themselves. Okay, so anyway, as we age, DNA methylation patterns they change, but they change predictably. right? And so scientists realized that they could measure those patterns and estimate biological age. And so the early clocks were designed to predict chronological age, right? The Horvath clock, right, was one of those first major clocks, right? And so it was often a pen tissue clock because it was designed to work across multiple tissues, right? And so that's what pen tissue means. If you think about like in radiology, a pan scan is a scan of your whole body. So pen tissue just means multiple tissues. Um, and so it was groundbreaking, right? It was just amazing because it showed that aging leaves measurable molecular fingerprints, and it was awesome. And so the next clock is the Hannum clock, and the Hannum clock was another early clock, and it was developed primarily from blood samples. It also estimates age using DNA methylation patterns. But here's the important point: those first generation clocks, they were very good at predicting like chronological age, right? But not always at predicting disease risk, or mortality risk, or how healthy somebody actually was, right? Then came the second generation clocks, right? Like the pheno age. And the pheno age was designed to better reflect like physiological aging, right? It combined uh, DNA methylation with clinical biomarkers associated with aging and mortality risk, right? And so the next clock was Grim age, GRIM age. And they took this way further, right? Grim age is one of the strongest clocks for predicting mortality risk because it was trained using markers linked to smoking, plasma proteins, and lifespan related outcomes. And so, um, and so, I think anybody ever heard of Rhythm Health? I use Rhythm Health, and they have a biological clock or a biological, a biological clock. I'm sorry, epigenetic clock, and they give you your epigenetic age every month that you get your labs drawn, and they send you. I'll talk about it later, but they'll send you this little thing, the little kit. You just attach it to your arm. It collects your blood, super easy, and then it tells you all this data. There's lots of labs, and for the longest time, I wasn't using them because they weren't including the hematocrit and the hemoglobin, but now they do, right? And it's just one little tube, and it just collects in 5 minutes. Then you send it off, or they'll send somebody to your house to pick it up, and then just within a week, you have all your labs and your epigenetic age, and you can monitor that. Isn't that cool? Anyway, so one of the other clocks is called the Dunedin pace clock. And so this one's a little different. This was instead of simply asking like how old does your body look biologically, it asks how fast are you aging right now, right? So this is different, right? And this is an important distinction because if someone's 50 with a biological age of 57, then that's pretty useful information. You know what I mean? And so, but if we can estimate whether the person is currently aging faster or slower than expected, now we can start asking better questions. Are they sleeping well? Like, are they inflamed? Are they insulin resistant? Could they be overtraining? Are they not letting themselves recover? Are they under recovered? Do they drink alcohol every night? Are they metabolically unhealthy? Are they carrying too much visceral fat? Like we can start asking all these questions, and then we can start checking off things. Okay, they have this. Their age is faster than normal. Are they chronically stressed? Oh, look, stress is. I mean, you can rule out a lot of things and rule in a lot of things. So this is where longevity medicine becomes more practical, right? So we're moving away from guessing and moving toward measuring, and that's really neat, right? And this is why I like biomarker tracking. Again, um, I think that there's a lot of different things out there, and some people get very confused, right? Because there's just so much data. My gosh, there's so much data, and so like, where do I go for to if I wanted to get my biological age? or get an epigenetic clock and follow. I think Rhythm Health is really probably the best one, right? Um, because right now, in my opinion, it's fast, it's cheap, you know. Um, for example, so Rhythm Health has a monthly lab work. It's monthly, but it doesn't have to be monthly, right? And so it's a service, and I think you pay like $100 a month, right? And so most people just check their labs once a year, right? And so you can check your labs every month and make changes, monitor. If you're really into that, some people, like the people I take care of, most people, they're really trying to dial it in, right? Their health is their wealth, and so they're trying to take care of themselves, right? And so doing something like this is really nice. And so anyway, a single lab draw, um, it can be influenced by sleep, stress, hydration. It can be influenced by your exercise regimen, illness. You could have, alcohol maybe a day before you got your labs, fasting status or something like that. Anyway, but when you check the markers repeatedly, you begin to see patterns. And that's the benefit of doing monthly. Again, I mean, you could always do it quarterly. That's option, that you can take advantage of. But so you can see whether you're in interventions. I mean, obviously, if you're not doing anything for yourself, it'd be a waste of money because nothing's going to change, right? But if you're constantly trying to improve yourself, you can notice, right? Is your fasting insulin improving? Is your inflammation coming down? Is your lipid profile improving? Is your A1C getting better? Is your testosterone optimized or not? Is your liver health improving? Like all these things that you can track, and so that's cool. This is the future of health optimization, really. And this is like precision, precision medicine. Not just how do you feel, not just your labs are normal, but are you aging slower? Are you recovering better? Are you becoming more resilient over time? So, now I have to also be clear, like biological age testing is not perfect, right? They still got a long way to go, right? But it can help, right? It shouldn't be used to scare you. You know what I mean? But you can use it as a trend. If you're making improvements in your life, right? Biological age testing is not destiny. You know what I mean? It's not a diagnosis. And so it shouldn't be used to scare your people or yourself, right? If you're doing these, right? These clocks are just tools, okay? So they're not estimates. I mean they are estimates, but they're not destiny, right? And so, you also want to compare them with other clinical context, right? So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about. Just getting into what biological clocks are, epigenetic clocks, because a lot of people don't know, and a lot of people honestly don't know that it's a thing. But if you really wanted to dive in and get yours checked, you should check Rhythm Health. And you can use my code Rhythm Health, and you can get $20 off your first month, which I think that's like, you're going to end up paying like $70, something like that. So anyway, let's move on. Let's transition. Let's move on to and we're going to talk about why sleep is the master longevity tool. Okay, but then after that, we're going to talk about the peptide spotlight of the week, which is the DSIP, the Delta Sleep Inducing Peptide. And I'm going to go deep on this one, right? Because I think you guys should know about this peptide. It's really good. And as always, I give you the science. I give you the truth. None of this bro crap that you get, on any other any other peptide video. You'll probably get a lot of junk. And I've watched a lot of them, and I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Anyway, so I'm going to dive into that, and then we're going to wrap it up. Okay. So segment number 2. So why is sleep the master longevity tool? So during sleep, right, brain detoxification occurs. Have you ever heard the glymphatic system? The glymphatic system, right? So this is when you sleep. This happens. All this metabolic waste is removed, right? Beta amyloid. Beta amyloid plaque is associated with Alzheimer's disease. The more sleep you get at night consistently, it helps the glymphatic system, and it helps to clear beta amyloid. And this can also reduce possibly neurocognitive decline. And so that's really, really important. So your brain literally washes itself while you sleep. This is super important, fit friends. I hope you're getting this, right? I'm trying to sell you on sleep, right? You got to get some better sleep. Next, hormone optimization, right? When you're asleep, your body releases growth hormone, and growth hormone does all kinds of cool stuff, you know, and, like stimulates collagen production. Growth hormone is directly it's, it's involved with collagen formation, right? And so that's awesome. It also helps you sleep better. Um, Growth hormone does. It also helps to build muscle. It helps to recover. It helps to restore. I mean, growth hormone's important. Also, sleep, it helps with testosterone production. It helps with cortisol regulation. If you think about it, like cortisol, and when you wake up in the morning, it's the highest it's going to be. And then cortisol predictably declines throughout the day till about midnight. It's down to nothing, basically. And so this is why, like your biorhythms, if you work nights and then you shift to days, that cortisol rhythm can get really screwy and it can make it very difficult to do things like lose weight, right? It also can affect insulin sensitivity. And so, like many men come into my clinic convinced they need testosterone. They're just convinced, they just know it, right? But and some absolutely do, right? Many absolutely do, but many are running on only 5 hours of sleep, right? Like I was saying earlier, and they're expecting for their hormones to function optimally, right, or at least normally. And it's not. It's just not going to happen. You got to get to sleep, right? Another thing, when you're sleeping, cellular repair becomes a thing, right? Sleep promotes DNA repair, protein synthesis. You build muscle, while you're asleep, but especially if you're taking in protein, right? You have to take in the protein. And then immune surveillance, right? Tissue recovery, all these things happen. Recovery occurs after the thing, right? It doesn't recur during the thing. And so I talked to, I'm a competitive bodybuilder. And this year I haven't done a show yet, but I haven't decided if I'm going to do one. But um, when you go into the gym to work out, that's not where the growth occurs. That's where the damage occurs. And then your body rebuilds while you sleep. If you're not getting enough sleep, then you're not going to see the results that you really want to see, right? Recovery happens after, right? Also, inflammation control. Got it happens at night. Chronic sleep deprivation increases C-reactive protein, which is an inflammatory marker. Interleukin 6, tumor necrosis factor alpha. Like these are, this creates a pro-aging environment, right? Inflammation is bad, right? Chronic low grade inflammation. And this will continue to happen the less sleep you get. Just look at people who don't sleep. Like for years, they've just been sleeping poorly. They look exhausted, right? They're not aging well. That's because of all this other stuff that's happening underneath. They don't even realize it. So, anyway, sleep is important, friends. And so I'm just, and again, like I said, I'm trying to sell you on 6.5 to 8 hours of sleep. Just prioritize it. I would just do this for 1 month. For 1 month, just say, because there's months where people say, I'm not going to have any alcohol this month. This month, or maybe July, 6.5 to 8 hours a night. Go to the bed at the same time every single night, and just for the month, and see how much better you feel when you start prioritizing your sleep. I promise you, it'll change your life. It's super important. I go to bed at 10 o'clock at night, most nights. Sometimes it's a little later, 10:30 maybe. But my chronotype on my Aura ring tells me exactly the optimal time according to my biorhythms for me to go to sleep. And I try to do that consistently every single night. And it's amazing. And so we're going to transition over to wearable revolution. The wearable revolution. That's what we're talking about. And this will I think that you guys will like this, right? I think everybody has some type of wearable, or at least most people, like an iWatch. That's a wearable piece of technology, right? And so, being able to measure yourself is probably one of the coolest things that we can do these days. It's like very James Bondish, right? Like we we wear things on our wrist that 30 years ago James Bond was wearing, and everybody's like, "Wow, that's awesome." I wish I had something like that. And so we have all this tech available to us, and we can use it for so many good things to improve our bodies, right? So I want to start first with the Aura Ring. Now, the Aura Ring just came out with Generation 5. I have a Generation 4 because I love it and it works just as fine, just fine. But anyway, the strengths of the Aura Ring, it can stage your sleep. It can tell you, like, are you in deep sleep? Are you getting a lot of light sleep? Are you getting REM sleep? And each one of those matters. Each one of those are associated with a different wave pattern when you're sleeping, right? And so you want to make sure that you're getting plenty of deep sleep and plenty of REM sleep. And it tracks that, which is absolutely crazy that it does that. It also helps you track your sleep regularity. It'll tell you when you're going to sleep, when you're waking up, every time. It'll tell you how much you're moving at night, which is wild, like how much tossing and turning you're doing. And it'll also tell you, um, like stuff like your HRV, your heart rate variability. It'll tell you what your readiness score is. And I try not to look at this one the first time, like the first thing that I do when I wake up, because you don't want it to be like that self-fulfilling prophecy. You wake up and you're like, "Oh man, I felt good," and then you see my readiness score, and it says it's like 40%, and you're like, "Oh, maybe I don't feel good," and then you're telling yourself this stuff, right? But I like to look at it later on in the day. But it tells you based on your sleep, based on your heart rate variability, based on your temperature, and just all these other biometrics that it tracks, kind of how ready your body is to face the day, right? Really cool. Temperature trends, like if you're a female and you don't have a uterus, right? But you're trying to track your menstrual cycle for labs or something like that. Aura Ring tracks your menstrual cycle. Even if you don't have a uterus, you'll know exactly where you're at every day of the month in your menstrual cycle. It's really, really cool. It's really ideal for like maybe longevity enthusiasts, data lovers, people who like tracking stuff, and people who really just don't like wearing watches because it's right there, right? Oh, and it's also got like a 5 to 6 day charge time. So you're not having to charge it every day, you know? Anyway, I also have an Apple Watch. So let's talk about Apple Watch. Apple Watch, it's got some really cool strengths, right? Sleep tracking, it's got that, but it's hard to sleep in a watch for me. I can't do it. I've tried. It does tell you your HRV, your heart rate variability, and just in case you guys don't know what heart rate variability is, let me tell you a little bit about that. HRV or heart rate variability is one of the most important longevity metrics that we have, right? And heart rate variability is basically a balance between your sympathetic nervous system and your parasympathetic nervous system. And it's measured in milliseconds. And what it is, it's those little spaces between your heartbeat, like da-doom, da-doom, da-doom. It's that space in between those da-doom. And that is the space that you measure to get somebody's heart rate variability. And the lower the heart rate variability, the worse off you are. That means that you have more sympathetic tone, fight or flight, and less parasympathetic tone. And so your HRV can tell you some really important stuff. If you have a very low HRV, it's probably because you're under a lot of physiological or mental stress. And so if it is physiological stress, then okay, I think I need to back off the gym a little bit, or I need to back off my runs, or whatever it is that you're doing that's physiologically stressing you out. It's a good metric to help track that, because if your HRV is low, then you're probably in an inflamed state, you're in a fight or flight state, and it's a stressful state. And so you got to get out of that. So anyway, that's what HRV is. Another cool thing the Apple Watch does is it has EKG, right, or ECG. It's very, it's one lead, but still, if you're having AFib, it's going to show up in one lead, and that's all you need, you know, um, which I like that. I think that's cool. It does have an activity tracker. I use mine anytime I'm in the gym. That's when I wear my iWatch, because it's going to let me specifically, like, I'm running or I'm on the stair mill, for this amount of time, or I'm lifting weights, anything like that. And it's very cool. You can actually track your zone heart rates if you're really interested in that. And what I mean by that is your zone. 2, whenever you're doing cardio, zone 2 cardio is probably the best cardio for weight loss because your body's going to preferentially pull from fat for energy during zone 2 cardio. And so on your iWatch, if you're on the stairs or if you're on a run, it doesn't show it on a walk unless they've updated it. But if you're on a outdoor run or an indoor run or stairs, um, whenever you activate the activity tracker, just scroll up and then you'll see zone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so keep in zone 2 if you want to burn more fat. If you want to, improve your cardiovascular health, your heart health, then you go into those zone 3, zone 4. And so that's really cool. I don't know of another metric or another device that actually captures your zone trainings actively while you're doing it. And it also can give you VO2 max estimates. And so this is ideal for just a general population, or fitness minded people who just want to track those things. So another one is Whoop, the Whoop band. It's like a wrist band. It tells you recovery metrics, strain score, HRV tracking, very athlete focused. It's ideal for athletes, maybe high performers. But honestly, I tried it. It worked for like a week, and then it started glitching, and I was really frustrated with it. And it doesn't even have like there's nothing on it. It's just a band, and you have to go to your app to see any of the stuff, right? I don't know. I can maybe it works great. Maybe I just got a bad one, but I was not very excited about it, and I was actually very angry because I spent a few $100s on that thing, and it stopped working. But it was very inconvenient. Anyway, so the next is Garmin. Garmin has a lot of crazy, crazy cool things. And so they do training readiness, HRV status, sleep metrics, basically everything that the Aura Ring wear does, but it's on your wrist, right? And so, yeah, ideally, I guess it's just about the same, right? So just people who are interested in their health. They are expensive. Like some of these can be over $1,000, right? And so these are like for maybe endurance athletes, cyclists, runners, that kind of thing. Um, I mean, Garmin is top of the line, cool stuff. So anyway, I would say like if you're using a piece of wearable technology, one of the most important things to track is your HRV, right? Because it helps HRV, like I said, it helps to reflect your balance between your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system, right? So it helps reflect recovery, resilience, and nervous system balance, right? Also, your resting heart rate. This is super important. If you have the higher resting heart rate you have, and I just read an article yesterday that was talking about how I can't even remember. I don't want to tell you the incorrect stuff, the incorrect data, but they said for every 10 points of your resting heart rate goes up, there's like a 17 increased percentage risk of early death or something like. I don't. It was very daunting, and I couldn't believe it when I read it. I had to read it twice, but now I've forgotten the exact figures, so I don't want. But it's something like that, right? So your heart rate, your resting heart rate, is super super important. It directly correlates with increased risk of all cause mortality and a cardiovascular risk, other things, right? And so I'll find it and I'll tell you about it later. Okay, so um, another sleep efficiency, right? Sleep efficiency. I'm trying to sell you on sleep. Get a wearable tracker that will allow you to help you track your sleep better for 1 month. Just do it for 1 month. And by the way, like most of these can be bought with an HSA card or an FSA card. So if you have like a health savings account, they're covered if they're FDA approved, like the Aura Ring, the Apple Watch. Um, I don't know. I've tried like 5 different wearables, and Aura just kills them every time. I just always go back to the Aura. So I'm just letting you know that's my favorite. If you haven't been able to, figure that out. Also, recovery scores. These aren't perfect, right? But they're directionally useful, right? They can help you, trend that stuff. So don't obsess over a single night's sleep, right? You got to look for trends, and it's the same with HRV, right? You don't just look at your HRV one morning and be like, oh no. You want to trend that, every week. And so if you're wearing this thing all the time, then you're really getting a good idea of how your HRV is looking. Okay. So let's talk about really quick, how do we improve our sleep? If we're trying to get better sleep, what do we do? How do we do that? It's all about sleep architecture. And if your sleep architecture is poor, if you have a poor sleep routine, if you have a poor sleep environment, then it's, you have those things working against you, And so um, I'm gonna give you some deets on how to improve uh, your sleep. Okay, so morning light. So I'm going to show you something. This is really cool that I have. It's called a Verilux. Verilux. Check it out. I keep this in my office. This is a 10,000 lumen light. And when I turn this thing on, it's bright. It is bright. But what it does is it does something called circadian priming, right? And so it primes your circadian rhythms. You wake up, you immediately hit yourself with 10,000 lumens of light. And then it completely zaps your melatonin. It resets your biological clock, right? And so you do that within 10 to 15 minutes of waking up, right? Within 10 to 15 minutes, within an hour of waking up, right? And so the next thing is you want a consistent wake time. You want to wake up every morning at the same time. You need that consistency. And I was talking about that at the beginning. Consistency. Even the weekends. You've got to have that consistency because it develops that sleep rhythm that your body needs. Our body loves consistency. Even as children, we love consistency. We have to have it. I mean, that's it. It just, we do better with consistency. And so, next, cool bedroom, man. You want to make sure that your bedroom is cold. You want to be under that blanket, like, and that's how I am. I get under that blanket, just all nestled up. It's freezing. It's like 65 degrees in my room. I got this fan on too, and I'm just like, I get under there. It's nice. It's nice. So, the next thing, and I'm going to tell you a little story about this. So, you want to eliminate late night alcohol, right? And so, the first time that I tracked this, I had a few margaritas, and I was wearing my Aura ring. I looked the next day when I woke up. I'm like, all right, let me see what's up with this, because I didn't feel like I slept well. And I didn't have so much where I was hungover, but I just didn't feel well. My resting heart rate was like 90 all night because of the alcohol, right? It affected my sleep. I slept terribly. I was tossing and turning, and it just did not go well. And I've been tracking that. If I have a late drink, my sleep suffers, right? So remember that. Eliminate late night alcohol, right? It's one of the biggest sleep disruptors, guys. I'm telling you. Another thing is eliminating late night blue light, right? So being on your phones, watching TV, I mean, maybe you have a tablet that you keep by the bed. This is not good, unless you have some blue light glasses like these. Man, I'm such a nerd. These are my sunglasses. These are my sunglasses, prescription Ray-Ban Meta glasses, right? And I love these things. They have blue light blocking, which is really cool. So, if you want to eliminate blue light, but you still want to be on your screens right before bed, get some blue light glasses, right, that block that blue light, because it zaps your melatonin. And so, next, exercise. If you do, like, particularly resistance training and zone 2 cardio, right? If you exercise daily, and I like to exercise in the afternoon, not so late in the afternoon where there's a whole bunch of people there, like around 5, but around 2:30, 3 o'clock. That's usually when I work out. And I've structured my hours at the clinic for everybody to be off between 2:30 and 4:30, so people can go pick up their kids if they need to, and it allows me time to go work out when there's nobody at the gym. So it works out. But the later in the day that you work out, and especially the harder you push, the better sleep you're going to get, right? So that's helping on multiple fronts, the sleep and the working out. And the next thing is sleep apnea. You definitely need to evaluate if you're not whether or not you have sleep apnea. So many people are undiagnosed with sleep apnea. I had a friend who lived just 2 houses down from me, and one morning I was leaving the emergency room coming home, and they were wheeling him out on a gurney, covered. He had died. His wife had come up to me, and she collapsed in my arms. He had died. I said, "What happened?" She said, "He just didn't wanna wear his CPAP, and he died in his sleep," which is not a bad way to go, but, I mean, the people that you leave behind, and you might have some things that you wanna do, and so it's really important to be evaluated for sleep apnea. That's another thing with the ordering. I'm not trying to sell you on Aura, but it tells you what your average oxygen saturation is at night, and it tells you if you have sleep disturbances, meaning that you and then you wake up. It tells you that stuff. So you can actually get a pretty good idea whether or not you have sleep apnea if you wear an Oura ring. But sleep apnea it's associated with more than just poor sleep, right? But it's associated with hypertension. Like it can cause right sided heart failure. It can cause daytime fatigue. It can cause high blood pressure. It can cause obesity. Like sleep apnea is deleterious to your health. You've got to do something about it. If you have it, if you suspect you have it, get checked. If you live around the DFW area, I have a very good friend who is a pulmonologist, critical care pulmonologist who does sleep studies, and I can get you a referral, right? So just let me know. Let's see. Okay, so anyway, that's it. Do those things, and if you can do 3 or 4 of those things, I'm telling you, it's going to improve your sleep. Let's go on to the peptide spotlight, and then we're going to wrap this up. We're pushing 45 minutes right now, and so today on our peptide spotlight, we're talking about delta sleep-inducing peptide. Have you ever heard of this? DSIP? Okay, it's pretty wild, right? So, because today's episode is all about sleep, it's all about recovery, it's all about aging, it's all about longevity. We're going to talk about a peptide that fits perfectly into this conversation. All right. So, delta sleep inducing peptide. Now, right away, it sounds too good to be true. Sleep inducing peptide. But it's true. It's true. It sounds like something that you should put in. It should put you into deep sleep, right? Maybe improve recovery, lower stress a little bit, fix insomnia, and maybe turn you into a perfectly optimized human being overnight, right? But as always, at the Longevity Game podcast, we're going to dial that back. We're going to slow it down. We're going to look at the science, and we're going to separate what we know from what we think, right? And then, and then we're also going to discuss what's very much still uncertain. Okay. And so, delta sleep inducing peptide is a small neuropeptide, and it's made up of 9 amino acids. That means it's a nona peptide. Nona, nine amino acids. And so, I can go through the amino acid profile if you want, but I'm not going to. It's very easy to find out. All right. It was first described in the 1970s, after researchers observed that a substance isolated from the blood of sleeping rabbits appeared to induce slow wave sleep activity when introduced to other animals. All right. So that's where the name came from, delta sleep inducing peptide, because delta waves, delta sleep refers to that sleep, that slow wave stage of sleep, right? And so this is the stage that in sleep we often associate with physical restoration, growth hormone release, immune function, tissue repair, and some of the other restorative processes in the body, right? And so naturally, when researchers discover a peptide that seemed to increase delta wave activity, my gosh, people got really, really excited. Okay. And so here's where it really becomes fascinating. It's been studied for sleep, stress regulation, pain modulation, endocrine effects, withdrawal symptoms, and even anesthesia related research, right? So, despite, though, decades of interest and research, it still remains one of those peptides where biology is intriguing, but the clinical evidence is still it's just not there. It's just still incomplete, right? We don't have a lot of human studies on this stuff, right? So in other words, this is not a peptide that we can say, case closed, it's awesome, right? It's better to say something like this. This is enough signal to be really, really cool, right? But not enough high quality data, human data, to make a definitive case, right? And so let's talk about the sleep data first, okay? So some early studies suggested that the DSIP it may normalize sleep architecture, right? And so in certain people, with insomnia. And so in a small study of patients, um, these patients all had like chronic insomnia, right? Delta sleep inducing peptide appeared to influence sleep patterns, including sleep efficiency and aspects of sleep regulation. So that's cool. It was working. It was working. Other studies had suggested that DSIP may reduce sleep latency, which is the amount of time that it takes you to fall asleep. Which, by the way, the Oura Ring tells you if you what your latency is. Anyway, and it may improve the organization of your sleep, right? But a lot of these studies were so small that the sample population, it was just so random. Like some people were older, you know. Um, there was limited sample sizes. Some were like open label. I mean, there was like lots of different. I mean, there was a lot of studies, but none consistent, right? And so many haven't been replicated, and that's a problem, especially in these large, like randomized trials that we like to see. Whenever we're studying medications, you know. But I mean, to be honest, just not a lot of money. It's hard to put a lot of money into something that your body makes and then try to sell it. I'm talking about big pharma here, and then try to sell it and make money whenever it's something that you know, you can isolate from an animal. Does that make sense? There's not a lot of money in it. They're not gonna pursue all those rigorous clinical studies because it costs money, to do those. Anyway, um, in medicine, an interesting signal is not the same as a proven treatment, right? So when people online talk about DSIP like it's guaranteed cure for insomnia, that's going a little too far, right? It may be good for some people who have a certain type of insomnia, maybe. I don't know. The better interpretation is this. So, DSIP may have sleep regulating properties, which it seems to have, especially in certain dysregulated states, right? But the available human data, the evidence is limited, right? And a little mixed. And so now mechanistically, DSIP, it's interesting because it does not appear to act like a traditional sedative, right? It doesn't like make you groggy, you know? That's important. A sedative knocks you down, right? But healthy sleep is not the same as being sedated. I don't know if you've tried like a benzo before or like, have you ever tried Ambien? My gosh, I tried an Ambien one time. I felt awful. The next morning, I was so dead tired. I slept, but I don't think I slept well. And I was just really, really groggy, right? So the goal shouldn't be unconsciousness, right? The goal should be restorative sleep, right? And so DSIP, it just appears to be more of a sleep modulating peptide than a classic sedative. And so there's also evidence that the delta sleep inducing peptide like material is found in different parts of the body, right? Including the brain, the pituitary gland, the peripheral tissues, and body fluids. And so this is what I mean. Like, it's hard to spend millions and millions of dollars in doing, large randomized controlled trials whenever you can find this stuff in your body. You know, it's hard to patent that kind of thing. You know what I mean? So, anyway, researchers had looked at possible relationships between DSIP and the hypothalamus and the limbic system and the pituitary and ACTH, which is adrenocorticotropic hormone, or cortisol regulation and melatonin pathways and autonomic extone. You know what I mean? Like, um, they've looked at possible relationships and all those things, right? Um, and that makes sense because sleep's not really controlled by just one switch. There's multiple things that we have to look out, so it's like a network, right? Sleep is controlled by a network of things, right? And so it's like your circadian rhythm, melatonin signaling, cortisol rhythm, body temperature, adenosine buildup. I mean, there's lots of things. Light exposure, stress chemistry, inflammation. There's so many things that that are built into sleep regulation. It's not just a one thing, right? And so this is why I say it may be good for some people. It just depends on which of those things, the people are having problems with that's driving their insomnia, right? And so this is why sleep optimization is never just about one supplement or one peptide. It's a system, right? And so anyway, let's talk about stress real quick. One of the most interesting proposed roles of DSIP is stress adaptation. I don't know if it's similar to ashwagandha, but ashwagandha is one of those things you can get over the counter that helps regulate sleep and it helps lower stress levels, helps to improve cortisol regulation. I don't know if it's like that, but some studies have suggested that DSIP actually may interact with your stress response system, including the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA axis. And so, um, I don't know if you've heard of the HPA axis, but this is a communication system, but that it's between your brain, your pituitary gland, and your adrenal glands. And your adrenal glands is where you produce cortisol, right? And so when the system is dysregulated, people maybe feel wired at night and then exhausted in the morning. They may feel anxious and inflamed and just metabolically just all over the place, right? And this happens a lot with people who sleep, dysregulated, meaning that they work nights, then they're off in the daytime, they sleep at night, and they just have a crazy schedule. This happens a lot, and I've lived that life, and it sucks. Um, and so DSIP has also been studied in relation to adrenocorticotropic hormone and cortisol tested pathways. Um, but again, we got to look at the science. We got to be really, really careful, about these things. So the mechanistic data is very interesting, right? But that doesn't mean that DSIP is a proven therapy for adrenal function, anxiety, or insomnia. Okay. It does deserve a lot more research, and I would love to be involved in some of that. But my gosh, it's going to take a lot of people, and it's going to take a lot more. I mean, just one study ain't going to do it, right? We have to have consistent data. Some older research looked at DSIP in opioid and alcohol withdrawals settings. And so there was reports suggesting that improvement in withdrawal symptoms, sleep normalization, and even psychomotor performance, right, in people who are withdrawing. Again, not a lot of research, just a few things, out there. So I mean, there's so many cool things, promising things with this peptide. We just, we're not doing as much research on it as we should be. It's very promising. Definitely not a proven peptide. So let's bring this back to longevity. Why would a sleep related peptide matter in a longevity conversation? Well, what did I tell you in the beginning? Sleep is one of the biggest regulators of biological age. Poor sleep, it increases inflammation. Poor sleep worsens insulin resistance. It impairs testosterone production. It disrupts growth hormone secretion. It worsens blood pressure. It worsens immune surveillance. It increases cravings. It worsens recovery. It affects your brain's ability to detoxify. Remember the glymphatic system. And then poor sleep accelerates the entire aging phenotype, your whole, like your physical appearance. So if a peptide could safely and reliably improve sleep quality, sleep architecture, or sleep regulation, that would be super meaningful, right? Does that make sense? This is why I've tied that peptide into the longevity conversation. So, but again, the key phrase is safety and reliably. And so we're not exactly there with DSIP, but another important point is the DSIP is not FDA approved as a treatment for insomnia. It's not a replacement for diagnosing and treating sleep apnea. It's not a replacement for proper sleep hygiene. It's not a replacement for circadian rhythm alignment. It's not a replacement for weight loss when weight is driving airway obstruction. It's not a replacement for reducing alcohol. It's not a replacement for stress management. You follow me, guys? It's not a replacement for, overrides poor behavior. you um, it's all those things matter, right? And so, if you're sleeping 5 hours per night, you're drinking alcohol before bed, you're scrolling your phone, doom scrolling, for hours, until midnight, until your eyes are starting to get a little heavy, eating a heavy meal at 10 p.m. and then skipping morning sunlight and never exercising. I don't think the delta sleep inducing peptide is the first answer for you. I think I think the first answer is fixing those inputs, right? The foundations. Once the foundation is there, advanced tools may have a place. You know what I mean? But this is about, I think, I think peptides in general. I love peptides. I prescribe peptides all the time, and I have some great pharmacies who make sure that they are third party tested, they are pure, and they're potent, and they're exactly what they're supposed to be. But peptides are tools, right? You cannot replace the fundamentals. You have to do those first, and then you add the peptides. They should be used when appropriate to complement a well built system, right? And so, anyway, that matters. And so, I think we're about to wrap this up. When people um, are using peptides, I mean, a lot of the times people are buying this stuff on gray market, right? Because they can't find people that actually prescribe these peptides. Well, if you want, you can always reach out to me. If you live in Texas or Nebraska, you can just register for a no cost consult and we can talk about all this stuff. And it's no cost. We'll talk for 30 minutes. We'll figure some things out and maybe get you on some peptides. You just go to www.nextleveltrt.com. All right. So this is it, guys. I appreciate you hanging around. We're here at 1 hour. The future of longevity is not just about living longer. It's really not. It's about measuring what matters, right? Wearables are giving us an unprecedented way and insight into our physiology, right? But all the technology in the world cannot overcome poor habits, right? If I could choose one longevity intervention for the average person listening today, I'd probably choose sleep, right? Because sleep influences hormones, it influences metabolism, recovery, brain health, inflammation, and ultimately how we age. And so the best anti-aging therapy may not be found in a pill bottle. It might be found in your bedroom tonight. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for being around today. I really, really appreciate you guys tuning in. For the first time in a long time, I actually went live today on YouTube. And so I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want to be a guest on the show, go to be a guest at thelongevitygamepodcast.com and send me a message. If you want to sponsor an episode, go to sponsors at thelongevitygamepodcast.com. And we will see you guys next week. We'll come back next week and we'll be showing you how to push back on Father Time. And so I appreciate you guys. I hope you have a great day. And don't forget, go long.